group, Dr. Babu, and many distinguished participants to this important conference. I am told that the participation is from as many as 15 countries. I hope it is so. And this group is doing this kind of conferences for the last 5 years since its inception. I am told today that over 100 conferences are being held every year, and they are actually having online publications, as many as 250 or more. It is very difficult actually, even to run one journal, scientific journal, is not easy, and very difficult for scientific community to publish their research findings in reputed journals. The online publication does one good thing, that it is able to satisfy many of the young scientists to publish their papers in time, and they need not actually wait to get it published, even a paper for a year or more in reputed journals. So you are doing really, the omics group is doing actually wonderful job, and take the knowledge to, young and old, scientific community, generates knowledge, promotes actually research in various areas. And I am very happy that this is the second conference on agriculture, and that is being held in India, that Hyderabad. I think some of you from outside, you know, Hyderabad is science city of this country, and if you have time, you should visit some of the, very advanced laboratories you have, not only on, conventional technology, agriculture technologies, but also the advanced, what you call the biotechnology and other things. And there are very reputed institutions in this, city. Now today I wanted to speak on a very important topic, food nutrition security, how this can be achieved through advances in research. Food security has become actually a global problem for many reasons. It may be for want of producing enough grains and distributing to the people who cannot afford to buy. It is largely centering food. You have world over unrest. The governments are falling, and there is everywhere riots, chaos, largely because of the inflation of the grain prices. Even in India, 10 years back, the food was, if you take 1 kg of rice, it used to be only 15 rupees. Today, even you cannot get good rice for 45 to 50 rupees. It may further increase also. Now, before I start talking about, food security and nutrition security, I should define, for many are young, scientists, and you should understand what I mean by food security. For food security, that everybody in a country, a nation, should have enough food grains produced by the country or purchased by the country to feed its population. Now, to feed the growing population, you should have physical availability of food grain first. That is the key issue actually. You should have in the first place enough grains to feed your population. Then you should be able to reach that food to all sections of the society, because there is a very large section of our people who cannot afford to buy food and live happily. So food security means physical availability of food grains, keeping pace with the growing population, and the economic accessibility, purchasing power for the people to buy food. Now, I would say, based on the situation in this country and many countries in the world, that many countries are able to produce enough grains. India is producing today 260 million tons of food grains. And that is adequate to provide 450 grams per capita per day. There is no problem absolutely as far as the physical availability of grains, there is no problem. But in this country, 240 million people go to bed hungry. So it is not because of want of availability of food grains, but they don't have purchasing power to buy food. So India is not food secure. Want to talk about nutrition security. Very large number of people, because whatever we eat is not a balanced food. When you are not able to buy calorie itself, where is the question of buying actually fruits and vegetables, meat and fish and so on and so forth. So very large number of people, almost 65 to 70% of Indian population, particularly women and children, suffer from malnutrition of all kinds. So India is neither food secure nor nutrition secure. Now how we are going to achieve this? This is actually the point I want to discuss today. Now briefly tell you about the history of agricultural production in this country, that we started with the introduction of hybrid technology in millets, maize and sorghum and pearl millet. Almost towards the end of 50s or mid 50s introduced, towards the late 50s we could have actually this hybrid technology in millets. It was followed by semi-dwarf high-yielding varieties of wheat and rice in the mid-60s. Then came that hybrid technology in rice since 1990s. But China had, as early as late 70s, it introduced hybrid technology in rice as a technology to follow up of the the so-called high-yielding dwarf varieties. Then came actually introduction of exotic oilseed crops like sunflower and soybean. Both are not our crops, oilseed crops. We introduced later. Then we have in hybrid technology in many vegetable crops, by which we could enhance the productivity. As a result of this introduction of the technologies, we could actually increase the food grain by 5-fold from 51 million tons today, 260 million tons of food grains. Edible oil we have increased 2-fold from 6.5 to 14 million tons actually. But in spite of it, that our need is another 50% we are importing, and we are spending nearly 40,000 crores annually to import 50% of our requirement of edible oil. Same is the case with pulses. We could not make much progress like in oilseed crops. We have not made much progress. Whatever progress made is only in the food grain area. Then vegetable and fruits we have increased by 5-fold, 50 to 75 million tons of fruits and vegetables. Milk is one of the very impressive progress we could make in this country. We have increased 8-folds. Today we are producing about more than 110 million tons of milk. We are number one country in the world with milk production. Now our requirement is much more. If you look at actually the per capita availability of all these things, food grain there is no problem. The present level per capita availability is 440 grams and the minimum required is 460. Not much actually difference actually. We are almost able to feed this population. Cereals you see, for example, there is a little bit, not much difference in the present level and the required level. But the pulses and the edible oil, there is a big gap as I told you. Vegetable and fruits, 140 million tons, 140 grams per day we are able to provide today. Our requirement is 400 grams or so. Milk is 230, in spite of number one in the world. Actually, still our present per capita availability of milk is 230 grams, and we have to increase to 300 grams. So we are having shortage in some of the very important food items. I think you can recognize this man. This is the first and only agriculture scientist who got Nobel Prize, Norman Borlaug. And he is the man who revolutionized wheat production through so-called high-yielding dwarf varieties of wheat. He observed, when he got this Nobel Prize, he observed that the Green Revolution had won a temporary success in man's war against hunger. If it is fully implemented, could provide sufficient food for humankind through the end of the 20th century. Yes, it provided food by the end of the 20th century. But what is the balance sheet? Balance sheet is very much discouraging. Now over 240 million tons, earlier it was only 200 million tons of 1 billion plus global population remaining undernourished. We only constitute 1/5 of the population without enough food. No? And today, I think Dr. Mohan Kanda in the morning said that the Millennium Development Goal was to by 2015 we should halve the, make it one half of these undernourished people. From 200 million people to 100 million. But in all countries they could achieve, except in India, it has increased actually the number of people who remain undernourished. From 200 million to it has come to 240 million. If food grain prices are going to up and up, possibly the number will be increasing. Over 7,000 people die of hunger every day in this country. About 60% of women and children suffer from hidden hunger, what they call protein malnutrition, nutritional anemia because of the iron deficiency, low birth weight, and there are many other problems they suffer from, vision impairment and many other things because of the vitamin A deficiency. About 40,000 children go blind every year due to vitamin A deficiency. Now you can judge yourself that this country, such a populous country, 1 billion people, 1 billion plus people, they are neither food secure nor actually nutrition secure. Now our demand projections are terrible actually. Food grain production, I said 260 million tons, and by 2030, in another 17 years, we have to increase to 340 million tons. We have to add 80 million tons in the next 17 years. The growth has to be 2%. The 2% growth is very important because it has to come by only by yield increase, because there is no more land. There is no more land to grow, any crop. We have saturated. Now only by increasing vertically the yield level, that we can actually achieve that 340 million tons by 2030. By 2050, we have to add another, 80 million tons or so. It comes to 460 million tons. 70% increase from the present level we have to increase. Not only unique to India, worldwide also, we have to increase the production by 70% from what we are producing in the world today. Now, edible oil, again, there is a big shortage, I told you. We have to go almost, 3 times or so by 2050. Vegetables, we have to increase enormously. Everywhere the growth has to be not less than 3%. And even milk, in spite of, achieving such a goal, that by 2030 you have to double the milk production from 100 million tons to 200 million tons. It has to 360 million tons because still per capita availability is low. Now, there are many challenges. It is not so easy for the country, for the scientific community to achieve this kind of production goals because of the many challenges we have in achieving these future demands. The most important thing in this country is the population growth outpacing the agricultural production. Now, if you see the latest 2001 to 2010, that the growth rate of food grains is 1.6%. Our population still increasing on an average 1.8%. But if you see the last few years, it has gone to almost 1.3%. Now this is going to be a very difficult to, situation, how we are going to match with the enormous, the population growth. The rampant undernourishment and malnutrition, as I already told you, this is also a challenge we have to face. Rapidly shrinking natural resource bases. There is a very serious problem with water. It is estimated in the next 40-50 years, the per capita availability of water will go down by 40%. And agriculture uses almost 70% of the fresh water. Now, how are you going to, meet this requirement? And the soil health is decreasing. I don't want to go in details, then I would need actually 1.5 years for this, 1.5 hours to make this statement. So there is soil health is declining, and the plant genetic resources, after all the plant genetic sources are very important for, gradually improving, progressively improving the crop varieties. If you don't have variability in nature, then probably you will not be able to. That is also shrinking very rapidly. Large rainfed area, 60% of our area is rainfed, only 30-32% is irrigated, and the only irrigated area was giving an answer to our food production program in this country last 40-50 years. Persisting deficiency of pulses and edible oil, I told you. Unfolding adverse effects of climate change is going to be a very big challenge actually, climate change. It is already visible, it is happening, and it is going to bring down actually productivity of many of the crops. There is going to be more diseases, insect pests. I think there is going to be many problems. We are not able to really imagine what kind of changes going to happen affecting Indian agriculture or global agriculture because of the changing climate. Declining farm return for farmers. It is no more attractive agriculture, whether in the United States or in India. It is no more attractive professionally and economically. It is not attractive. A farmer doesn't want his son to go to agriculture. This is the kind of situation today because it is no more attractive. And reservation against the GM crops. You know very well. I think this is the part I will speak at the end of my talk actually. This is again actually genetically modified crops can solve some of the problems, but there is a serious reservation on health grounds and other risks associated with the GM crops. So I think probably unless we manage all types of constraints, we will not be able to achieve the goal. Science alone will not do it, but we have to address other socio-economic problems also. Now it is not that I told you that we have to add, about 60-70 million tons of food grains by 2013, another 17 years. But this can be achieved. I will say that it is not possible. It is possible. There is lot of underexploited potential of the already available technologies. We have not exploited fully the kind of technologies we have already. There is a wide gap between achievable and farmer achieved yields. You take your own high yielding varieties, and there is a big gap actually between what is achievable, the potential, and what is being by an average farmer. There is a very big gap. If we can find out the reason for this gap, and if we can fill even 30-40%, I think we will be able to add 30 million tons or so. Then scope for crop intensification. This country, in spite of so much irrigation, everything, even in irrigated areas, the intensification of cropping is 130 to 140%. Even in a country like Bangladesh, it is more than 170%. So that means you are taking only one crop in a year, or 1.3 crops, not more than that. We should be able to take, 2 crops, very good crops. That would mean actually there is a good crop intensification. Large underexploited rain-fed shallow lowland is the nearly 10 million tons of 10 million hectares shallow lowland ecology, and there is more than 2.5 million hectares of borrow rice. The productivity is very high. We have not exploited. These are opportunities we should be able to use. Underexploited hybrid technology in rice, mustard, and PGFT. We have come out with hybrid technology in a crop which was never thought we will be able to come out with the hybrid technology in a self-honored crop like rice. But today we have hybrid technology, but we have not exploited fully. We have hybrid technology in pulses, particularly GNP. We have hybrid technology today in mustard. I think probably if we exploit fully, we will be able to solve not only food grain need, but also rice, the edible oil need and also pulses need. And the emerging innovative crop improvement technology should help us actually, apart from the underexploited opportunities. I do not want to go into the details of all these things because I told you there is a wide yield gap between achievable and achieved yield, and it is almost in rice it is 25 to 50% yield gap is there in different states. If you take a state like Orissa, 50% of the potential only is exploited. So only Punjab, Haryana, possibly Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, they have actually 70% of the potential they are exploiting. If you can have 100%, if you are only harvesting, 70%, even in high productivity states. So this yield gap, we have to find out why it is. The reason is, it is that the partial complaints of the recommended package. When we actually scientific community gives, this is the package you have to adopt. If you adopt actually fully, even 80%, 90%, accordingly you will, reduce the gap. But because of many reasons, even farmers don't apply the fertilizer. They don't, control the insect and diseases timely. And there are many other problems because you don't use appropriate seed, appropriate variety for ecology, and as a result you are not able to get the yield you can easily harvest from the technology the scientific community has given. And there are many methods now available. I think integrated crop management is a wonderful one. Actually, this is what they call modified tree cultivation and etc. But possibly if you can motivate the farmers to adopt at least 80% of the recommended package, we will be able to add in the next 10-15 years that 20 to 30% of the area. If we can add 20 to 25 million tons of food grains, we can add. Now, cropping intensity, I already told you, we are nowhere actually compared to Bangladesh. 140% of the, the cropping intensity. That means actually you have 1.4 crops per year, as against 1.75 crops in Bangladesh. And there are many areas why we are not able to, particularly the rainfed eastern India, there is actually rice fallow is very large. In the country, we have more than 12 million hectares remain rice fallow. It is largely because of the rice fallow, our cropping intensity is low, and Madhya Pradesh itself accounts for 76% of the fallow lands, comes next to West Bengal and Bihar, Jharkhand and others. So it is largely because of lack of adequate moisture we are not able to second crop. Life-saving irrigation sources, if we can provide, I think a lot of groundwater is available. State to state, not even actually 50% of the groundwater available are not being used. In certain states, we extensively use, we mine the groundwater. As a result, we invite the problems like salinity, we invite the problems like iron toxicity, even other, problems we invite. Now, the another very important area is hybrid technology. Hybrid technology, I told you, it is very difficult to imagine in a self-pollinated crop like rice. And here is the man who is known as the father of hybrid rice, Yuan Longqing. And he is the man who made actually what was thought to be impossible as possible. And he developed the hybrid technology in rice by late 70s. And it used 1 ton more per hectare than the best varieties, and today almost 65% of the area in China, the rice area is planted to hybrid rice. The development of this, the extensive adoption of hybrid technology in China has increased actually 25 to 30 million tons annually, and China was also suffering once upon a time because of the food shortage. And because of the introduction of the hybrid technology, which added 25 million tons additionally per year, they could overcome this problem of food deficiency. But also they converted today 2 million hectares actually under, very good, non-grain crops, non-rice crops, commercial crops. So that means by introducing this technology, they are able to meet their food grain requirement, particularly rice. But we now they have actually succeeded in developing super hybrids, which will give 15 tons per hectare. They demonstrated in China today. Now I will tell you a little more. Nobody believed China actually. When they came up with this technology, nobody believed it. Everything China does, we think that they are just, joking. But they developed this technology and adopted extensively. And I told you the kind of success they achieved. And impressed with the China's success story, we introduced hybrid technology. We started actually hybrid technology in 1990 only. But in China, 1970, late 70s, they already commercialized this technology. They're taking advantage of parental lines of International Rice Research Institute, ideally suited to tropical Asia, and the experience of China in seed production and cultivation of hybrid rice. We came up with the first generation hybrid in 1995. Unfortunately, the pace of adoption of this technology was very slow. 1995 introduced. Now today it's almost how many years? 12, 14 years. Now the similar period, China could actually cover 18 million hectares, covering more than 55-60% of their rice area. But the same period, after learning everything from China, we are not able to move even 2 million hectares after 12 years, similar period. Now we have to identify the reason and see that how we can also, replicate the kind of success story of China. Possibly that will help us actually to add substantially to our grain production. And Government of India is doing very seriously, addressing this problem, and they are strengthening this program during the research plan. Now, why this pace of adoption was very slow? There were many reasons. One was the yield advantage. 1 ton they were not satisfied. Farmers were not satisfied with 1 ton yield advantage. And also the performance was not consistent. It varied from, place to place, farmer to farmer, the season to season. So that was one of the major problem actually, yield advantage and inconsistency in their performance, and the lack of hybrids for medium and medium late maturity. Following China and most of the East Asian countries, the government, the Indian scientists were always breeding hybrids of early and mid-early hybrids. But actually our need is actually medium late hybrids, because 90%, 95% of our rice area requires medium variety for Kharif season, wet season. But the kind of hybrids we have produced, the farmers were not happy actually. It cannot be fitted to, except 5 to 10% of the area, you cannot fit this, early maturing hybrid. And also many problems of quality. The initial hybrids were suffering from quality because of the not acceptable physicochemical properties of starch, and it was cooking, very sticky. So that was also one of the, reservation against hybrid rice, and also susceptible to many of the major diseases and insect pests. Now today we have, come out with, better parental lines. We have come out with wonderful hybrids today, and it will meet actually the kind of maturity we need, kind of cooking quality the consumers need, and also to a great extent many of the hybrids today are pest and disease resistant. Now we have also for different agroecologies, rice ecology, we have good hybrids for rainfed shallow land ecologies, and some of the hybrids are slowly, being adopted by farmers. Particularly interspecific indica japonica hybrids, a new plant type, in the new plant type background, there are many hybrids are coming up. Now the hybrid, I told you that 1 ton yield advantage farmers are not happy with. Now if you want to increase that yield vigor, yield advantage, then probably you cannot depend on hybrids based on only indica into indica hybrids. You have to go for intersubspecies hybrids, indica japonica hybrids. That is what China and many countries found, that if you go for intersubspecies hybrids, it should be, we will be able to increase the yield level substantially, yield vigor. Then we are coming out with the green super rice. This is actually an international program supported by Melinda Gates, Bill Gates Foundation. Supported program Green Super Rice. They are developing actually varieties and hybrids at the International Rice Institute and also in China. Now we are also following this in India, that we want to develop our future varieties and hybrids which are actually suitable, easily adaptable by small farmers, marginal farmers, which constitute nearly 70% of our farm. So we have to in future, depending on actually the shortage of water, the soil health and other things, the many problems, we have to breed our future varieties and hybrids that are actually easily adaptable by small and marginal farmers. That is what is called Green Super Rice, supported by Melinda Gates Foundation. Now this is the kind of hybrids today we have actually. Now I think probably if we can convince the farmer, if the farmers are convinced, possibly the adoption rate will go very high. We expect in another 4-5 years, we wish that we cover nearly about 5 to 6 million hectares under hybrid rice. Now the wheat, actually wheat is another very important crop in India. Rice and wheat constitute nearly 75% of our food grain, and though actually the hybrid technology was tried in wheat in the mid-1940s, but we could not actually come out with a good hybrid with additional yield advantage. There were very important reasons for that, that it is still far from commercial reality because of low standard heterosis. You don't get a good heterosis, and also low seed yield and high seed rate you have to use for planting wheat. So the cost of seed will go high, and there will be, unless we solve this kind of technical constraints, the hybrid wheat, even if you produce, we could not popularize because the seed rate is very high. Like direct seeded rice, you have to use very high seed rate. Seed cost is very high, and also seed yield when you produce hybrid seed is very difficult and very low. Now we have actually better the Madras lines, and the standard heterosis can be increased actually using synthetic wheat lines. Synthetic wheat lines means they have developed in CIMIC that using the original parental lines, what they call ABG genomes, they have synthesized hexaploid bread wheat, and probably if you cross those synthetic varieties, possibly the hybrid vigor increases. That is what CIMIC has come out with. I think probably in the next few years we will be able to with commercializable hybrid wheat also. Now maize, of course, it is not actually a major contributor to food grain production in this country, but of late actually it has got a big market, actually export market. People are going for as a poultry feed and also industrial use. I think now maize is gaining actually a lot of importance, and particularly we can go for single cross hybrids rather than two-way cross and all those things. I think probably single cross hybrids today in many of the countries, US and China and others, almost 100% of the maize hybrids are single cross hybrids, which gives very high yield. But we are still moving actually. Only 20% of our hybrids in maize is only hybrids or single cross hybrids. So we can actually, if we can improve the productivity of for rain-fed areas, particularly that constitute nearly 40% of the maize area, we don't have appropriate hybrids. There is a lot of research going on to identify very productive short duration hybrids for 40% of the maize area. Now another very important, development was actually in oilseed crops. Particularly, we are not able to. India's major oilseed crops groundnut, and we are not able to make much progress in groundnut. So far, in spite of ICAR and many other international issues, we are not able to increase the productivity of groundnut is a major oilseed crop. Now, another major oilseed crop in India is mustard. It's called Indian mustard, Brassica gentiana, and many people tried actually to develop, hybrids in this one, but they could not succeed. But it has been, it is a success in the case of Brassica napus actually, the European ones actually, Canada and other places. But we are not able to develop for a very long time, and today we are able to develop actually two hybrids have come out already, DMHR1, DMRH4. It is actually, the kind of materiality source they used for napus were very effective, and they could get to proper restorer lines, but it was not the case in the case of Gentiana, and they had to struggle, and through a very unique kind of materiality system, which will actually will be a universal material line. It can take any variety as a restorer. It's a very unique system. It has been patented, it has been developed by Delhi University, and there is another area we are thinking very seriously. We have already come out with products, what they call, genetically engineered materiality system and restorer system, what they call Barney's Buster based CM hybrid. We have already developed a DMRH11 actually. This hybrid is giving much higher yield than DMRH1, DMRH4. It is giving 25% higher yield than these things. But the problem is still because of the intervention by the Supreme Court, we are not able to take to the farm level open field testing. Once it is, we hope in another month or so, if Supreme Court allows GM crops, I think probably this will go to commercial planting by next year or so. So possibly this kind of the novel maturity system can be used across crop species. It is not specific to a particular crop, the technology. The same varnish system can be used for other crops as well. This is only to tell actually how this varnish is actually, you are using an RNase which degrades all RNA and makes the plant actually selectively makes right. And suppose you have another thing what they call pollen development normal. Once you use the varnish system, then the whole thing within the the tapetal layer you see it outside, the whole pollen development is distorted. And if you use faster, then again pollen development. This is a wonderful technology is being used in Canada and other places. Now another important problem is physical stresses. I told you very large area, only 65% of our area is rain-fed, and rain-fed condition has got its own problems of drought, and also there are areas where you have in rain-fed areas, but there are, areas where you have, the whole eastern India, it is not only that but also submergence. It's a very high rainfall area, the eastern India, almost 6-7 states. And what happens actually, that at the different stages of development of rice, it is submerged for 7 to even 15 days. The whole crop is killed actually during the wet season. If you can make actually your varieties tolerant to that, possibly it will greatly help. And they have already identified a gene called submergence tolerance gene 1A from one of our own varieties. It's called FR13A, and this was by Market Technology, International Rice Research Institute has come out with. But similarly, we have identified for salinity tolerance, drought, and even P deficiency, phosphorus deficiency. There are many problems. Soil problems are of very many kinds. And possibly we have actually genes available in nature, possibly the future varieties can develop to resist and restore the potential yield. But there are many we cannot solve through, the naturally available genetic variability. The genes will not work. We have to go for some of the innovative technologies. Now this is what I was telling, that the submergence tolerance actually now, the sub-1A gene is actually introduced by markers selection into many of the long duration varieties. Now if you can actually have that gene, the varieties, if it is submerged for 1 to 7 days actually, the yield reduction is not much actually. It gives actually, under the same stress condition, it gives higher yield than the black bar actually, gives higher yield. Even if it is goes for 8 to 14 days submergence, still its advantage because of the sub-1A is much higher than the normal variety. I think this is now spreading actually all over eastern India, in Indonesia, in Burma and many other countries, Vietnam and many other countries. The sub-1A is used, but still it is having effect actually. If it exceeds 14 days, it gets killed actually. Possibly we have to further strengthen this with yet another gene actually, possibly available in nature, and there is a lot of work is going on in many centers to identify such genes and actually strengthen this, the tolerance level. Now there are also good work is going on at the, the institutes in Bangalore, that what they do actually, they identify the varieties which are naturally tolerant to some extent to some of the stresses, and also they identify, transgenes, maybe actually transcription factors, etc. And they try to combine, rather than taking a susceptible variety and putting that transgene, they actually develop first actually varieties which will be able to stand to an extent that kind of stress. Then they combine with transgenes, and they are able to today develop some of the very good, drought tolerant groundnut varieties, rice varieties at actually Bangalore. Now there is, another very interesting thing about this, the salinity tolerance, particularly the both inland salinity and also coastal salinity is a very serious problem. This work has been done in Honorary University, and what they have identified, they identified two genes actually, and if you can have actually the fusion gene, both of them together, it can resist actually salt tolerance to a great extent. Again, this gene is patented, and many countries are trying to use this one and develop better, salinity tolerant varieties. Now, in India itself, the International Institute in Delhi and also Delhi University, they are actually developing using two important genes, what they call cleoxylase 1 and 2, and also they are, further strengthening with more genes actually. They are able to develop actually salinity tolerant varieties. So what I am trying to say, that the innovative technologies can help where, the conventional breeding, selection technology could not help actually. Now this is what actually a very good work is going on in actually, Delhi institutes. Then there is another way that you can also develop new plant types. This is actually, everybody is talking about new plant type today. The physiologists say that simulation modeling, the predicts actually that you can increase the yield by 25% over actually what we have in the high yielding varieties. By simulation modeling, you can change the plant frame morphophysiologically, and you can increase the yield level by 25%. And this is actually now catching up with many scientists, both physiologists and breeders. They are coming out with wonderful, new plant type varieties with higher potential. Now the so-called high yielding varieties of wheat and rice is 110 potential yield. But by this new plant type, you can increase by 12.5%, 25% yield can be increased. But by further actually strengthening, you can go up to, as Chinese are demonstrating, 15 tons potential yield can be increased. Now the plant type model is very simple. I don't want to make it very complicated. That if you see that old our sorghum and pearl millet varieties, they used to have multi-tillers. Even in maize, you used to have, more tillers, and they used to have actually more crops. Now today's actually the hybrid technology in sorghum, in maize, in pearl millet, hybrid crops, the genotype they have made it as a unicolor, single color, but they have increased the the top size or the earhead size. As a result, by developing a genotype in such a way that you can pack, you can do very high density planting. For example, in maize, they used to plant 35,000 plants per hectare earlier. Today they are going up to 50,000 plants per hectare, but the genotype has been changed, it is not multitiller. Now this way you will be able to increase the biomass. Keeping actually harvest index actually 0.5 or something like that, you will be able to increase the the yield level substantially. This is what has happened in maize, sorghum and other crops. Now similarly, the same concept, the marriage between actually, the genotype and the high density planting, possibly that IARI started this work under push, and also in India we started in Delhi, and we have come out with the new plantain varieties which are having higher yield, 12.5 tons potential yield as compared to 10 tons which we used to use. Now this is having actually a different kind of plant type, semi-stalled stature. It's not 100 centimeter, 120 centimeter. Medium growth is not early duration, should be medium duration. Optimum number of tentacles, optimum number of spikes per tentacle, high percentage grain filling more than 80%, and the leaf area index should be above 3 or 4, and robust and persistently healthy root system, and increase the seed size also. Possibly by high density planting, you would be able to, reap higher harvest. Now, this actually the man again, Yuan Langping, and he was impressed with the International Rice Institute's work on the new plant type concept, and he introduced actually a mega project, a nationwide mega project in 1996 to actually develop future hybrids in a new plant type background. The new plant type background development was independent of hybrid rice, even in IARI. But people thought that by new plant type, by improving the morphophysiological frame of the plant, possibly you will be able to increase the yield level further. And if you can combine this new plant type with hybrid technology, probably you will be able to boost the yield further. This is how Yuan Langping, he led actually a big nationwide mega project. 1996, his objective was by 2015, he wanted to increase the yield level by 15 tons per hectare. And he has actually developed wonderful, the hybrids today. If you see that hybrid, you will be really amazed to see the type of material China has developed. The intersubsidy hybrids, particularly that CU9308 and the Liangyu Beiju, these two hybrids give average 12 tons per hectare in China. So it is actually the concepts, transformed into technologies by making actually the appropriately, as I told you, hybrid and the new plant type, you will be able to increase the yield level. Now there is another area a lot of people are working on it. The work was started in the Cornell University. They thought probably in the evolution of crop plants, all the variability present originally in the, the progenitor species have not been actually captured in the modern varieties. It's a concept. The concept is all the, cultivars across crops, they were all, developed from the progenitor wild species, right? Now, the progenitor wild species had actually enormous, variability. For every gene, they had many allelic variants. But in the evolution of, the cultivars, by, domestication and further improvement, the nature also selected something, the man also selected. In that process, many of the valuable allelic variants have been lost in the wild species itself or in the primitive cultivars. If you can trace back to identify those, QTLs, they call it actually, the allelic variants, probably you will be able to identify new gene sources to increase the yield level. For example, this is a, diagram you show seen in Nature, in Science, and many journals. It's a very classical work. These people, they could see. For example, let us take, for example, the first one, the wild species. Let us say there are actually 3 allelic variants for, let us say, grain weight or grain number. Now, from wild species to early domestication by man, all the yellow, blocks lost evolution. By the time, man started, improving for his own need, actually, he lost the other block also. So, some of them have been, because of the need, nature also eliminated some of them. The man also, by his selection choice, he has eliminated some of them. He did capture all the variability into the modern varieties. If you can go back by QTL technique, we can identify these, genes in the wild species and also primitive cultivars. And if we can, bring them together, we will be able to increase the yield level. Now, these are some of the yield genes they have identified in many of the wild species. Varieties rufibogan, varieties nivara, and many other, the A-genome species which are very closely related to cultivar rice they have identified. It's not only in rice, across crops nearly 3,000 yield genes have been identified. And out of them, which are most promising, we can again actually incorporate into high yielding varieties and see whether we will be able to boost the yield level. Now, this is how actually once you identify the sources, you will be able to pull all these very important yield component genes, and we will be able to increase the yield level. Now, this is actually an experiment again conducted by several locations in southern United States by Honorary University for 2 to 3 years, and they identified 2 yield genes in the varieties rufibogan, YLD2 on chromosome number 2, and similarly in chromosome number 6 they identified 2 yield promoting genes, and when they incorporated and evaluated over many locations, they could see 29% yield increase, 27% yield increase with 2-1, YLD2-1, but YLD6-1 is not giving that much yield. Probably there are more and more content. This paper very recently appeared. I think that in India also we are doing, myself, my own students, we are doing this work for a very long time, for the last 15 years. We have identified many QTLs, but if you can very carefully evaluate them for that yield enhancement, probably we can very easily combine even by conventional method using markers associated with that. Now, the physiological basis of yield is another area people are, very seriously working on. Yield improvement achieved so far in rice and wheat has been through altered partitioning of resources. This is what you call harvest index. How do you actually apportion actually the energy into grains and the source? The increased photosynthesis resulting in higher biomass and grain yield is due to promotion of leaf area and leaf longevity, and not because of enhanced photosynthesis by manipulation of key photosynthetic enzymes. We have not manipulated the photosynthetic enzymes to increase the yield level. All what we have done is we have increased the leaf area index. As a result, we could actually increase actually the grain yield by the partitioning of the biomass. Now, this is a very interesting work actually. Tom Okita did this work, very interesting work, and long back he did actually. He actually showed actually, anyway, this in the starch biosynthesis pathway, that there is one enzyme actually, ADP glucose pyrophosphate is a very important a key enzyme which converts glucose phosphate, 1-phosphate, into actually ADP glucose, which actually is the basic actually the substrate for development of starch fractions, amylose and amylopectin. Now, what happens is this enzyme is a very, very rate limiting enzyme, and this enzyme can act in 2 ways. That it can convert actually glucose phosphate into ADP glucose as long as it is not intervened. But what happens, it itself develops a sort of feedback inhibition that the PA actually once reaches a level, possibly it will not act, its activity will be curtailed, and as a result there will be no continuous starch synthesis. So if we can manipulate that ADP glucose pyrophosphorylase enzyme and make it silent or somehow or other erratic, possibly the starch synthesis is born. This is actually a very classical work, and by silencing gene and also by introducing a mutated gene from a bacterium, they could demonstrate in potato the starch synthesis can be increased. But this work still going on. Recently was here on Makita in Hyderabad, and we had a lot of discussion with him. I think he is coming out with still better technologies. Let us hope actually that whether we can manipulate the starch biosynthetic pathway and see that we will be able to increase the level. Now another area is actually, you know about it, actually this climate change is a very serious problem. It is happening, and its effect will be increased temperature, increased carbon dioxide level. It is going to create a problem. Now if you can make actually crops like rice and wheat major food grain crops, and unlike maize, if you can make this C3 rice, the carbon pathway, assimilation pathway rice, you can make it to C4, probably you can increase the yield level 50%, and the water use efficiency can be increased almost 2 times, and you can nitrogen use efficiency also has been increased. But there is a big international program, again supported by Bill Gates Foundation, that a very huge program is going on. Several institutions all over the world, they are working on it. It is not going to be so easy to make a C3 crop into a C4 crop, but if you can understand the biochemistry, physiology of the and also anatomy of it, possibly you will be able to convert actually C3 rice, because when the temperature increases to climate change, the future varieties has to adapt to actually high temperature, the carbon dioxide level will be higher, and there will be many problems. If you can manage that the increased carbon dioxide in a utilizable way, then possibly you will be able to convert into in all actually the adverse effects into advantages. Now this work is going on, and they are trying to change. They have actually used that enzymes which are available in the C4 plant like maize. When they introduce like Pepsi, etc., that it acts actually, but it doesn't convert into starch. Now that means it needs actually a very specific environment, what they call anatomically, what they call Kranz anatomy, that it should have bundle shape and also mesophyll tissue in such a way, then only it will be able to. In C3, you can see actually a very large mesophyll area, very small bundle shape along the veins actually. But in C4 maize, it is like this. But it is not so easy to change the anatomy of a plant. In spite of any amount of work, you do manipulate it, you will not be able to make actually C3 into C4. But I think there are, indications. There are certain, even in rice itself, they believe that sometimes the mesophyll tissue itself can act, some of them, which are close to the, the veins, they will be able to act as bundle shape. But we do not know actually. We have to understand more how best we can actually make use of this variability available in nature. A lot of work is going on to change the anatomy and biochemical changes and fine-tuning from C3 to C4. This work is led by Dr. Quick in the National Institute of Biotechnology. Now I am coming to the last part of it, that the nutritional deficiency. India, not only India, many of the developing countries, they are suffering from protein energy malnutrition. Almost 60-70% of the area people in developing countries are suffering from protein energy malnutrition, and the vitamin A deficiency, nutritional anemia, iodine deficiency, and also due to dietary deficiency and many of the vitamins and also minerals, zinc and calcium, etc. Now, you cannot make actually rice to produce actually, rice is a very important crop. The major emphasis all over the world is on rice and wheat, and to a great extent on maize also. Now, whether we will be able to increase the protein content. Protein malnutrition is very serious. The major drawback nutritionally in rice is only low protein content. Though biologically rich protein rice has, its major limitations are very low content, 8%. Of 8% in our cooking process, we lose everything. In the milling process, we lose everything. Finally, we eat the starch only. There is no protein. Now, if you can make actually, rice with, retaining that kind of, protein or enhance the protein level from 18 to 10 or 12% like wheat, possibly we will be able to solve this problem. They started with, they identified that again actually, Dr. Siddiq group in Delhi, in Jawaharlal Nehru University, they identified this gene from amaranthus seed, actually a protein they call AMA1A. And this gene, if you can, splice into potato first, they found that increase actually the quality of the protein in potato. Potato is actually having hardly less than 2% protein. It cannot be a protein crop. It is a vegetable in this country. Unlike in the Western world, it is the the carbohydrate. Now, what we thought, rather than actually working on potato, we thought the same gene can be used amount and can be used in rice, and the protein level and protein quality can be increased. And very interestingly, its protein quality of this gene is so enormous, several times it increases some of the essential amino acids. Now you will be knowing this man everywhere actually, Botricus, and I call him gold man who developed golden rice. How can you make actually the white rice into yellow rice? The yellow rice is nothing but beta carotene rice. Beta carotene is very important, and unless you consume that, it cannot be converted to protein. Vitamin A. Vitamin E is very vital for actually, vision. Proper vision. The vision impairment will happen largely because of the deficiency of vitamin A. Now, what he did actually, except in maize, maize is the only crop where you have vitamin A, the beta carotene. Now, in all other crops, rice, wheat, etc., it reaches to a level afterwards that pathway is completely blocked. It will not go to the level of producing beta carotene. Now, if you can identify why it has been blocked and what other genes are not working, and if you can actually introduce those genes, 2-3 genes, possibly you can make rice also to produce beta carotene. And this is a very, very interesting work. I think he deserves actually a Nobel Prize actually. If it is going to be a reality tomorrow, it is a reality, but because of reservations, the world is not still, serious about utilizing it. This is how actually Geranium diphosphate is the end actually. Then if you can introduce that phytin synthesis gene from, daffodil, now they are trying to use from, maize, and also you can use another gene actually from Erwinia bacterium. And if you can put actually 3 genes in the pathway, the geranium diphosphate will not be converted to GA production, etc. It will finally end up with beta protein. And this is a very, very remarkable work, I would say, actually, a very classical kind of work. And he was here last year in India, and we could actually, now probably it is expected by 2014 or 15, it will be a commercial reality, and it will solve many of our nutritional problems. Now actually Syngenta has taken over this project, and instead of having actually the gene from daffodil, they have used actually gene from maize, actually the phytin synthase gene, and that enhances actually the beta carotene content in golden rice almost several times actually, 1.6 to almost 13 microgram per gram of rice. This is very interesting, and he has changed the bacterium also, which gives the the carotene desaturase gene also. Now, the iron is equally important because of the iron deficiency. Many of the, the women and children, they are suffering from, nutritional anemia, and there are many possibilities to improve the ferritin, the iron content in crops. Actually, this was first started with rice, using actually some of the variability available in nature, but didn't work. Finally, now they are going for ferritin gene identified from another crop species, and if we can actually have this gene, possibly the rice will have higher, iron content. Now this has been very well worked out, and they have fed actually some of the, the nuns actually in Philippines, and they found that by eating actually, iron rich, rice, their, iron content in the bloodstream is good actually. They don't suffer from anemia. Now there is another problem, is minimizing the storage losses is also a very serious problem. Nearly 40% of our agricultural produce is wasted because of poor storage. If you see the perishables, particularly the fruits and vegetables, almost 45% of this lost whatever we produce. It is largely because their shelf life is very low. Can we improve the shelf life? They tried actually by natural variability. They could not make it actually in many of the fruit crops. Now they have identified some of the very valuable genes which will actually, make actually the fruit wall very strong. It will not easily, go soft in the ripening process. Probably we will be able to, save very large amount of perishable fruits and vegetables, and will be able to provide to the people. Now, this is not a good photograph. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This the control. Tomato suffers a loss. It's, its keeping quality goes very bad. This work also done in Honorary University. Now that the National Plant Genome Research Institute, they are continuing with that. They have identified the two important genes. Earlier, the first transgenic was developed in 1966 or 64, flavor saver in the United States. But it did work very well. They have withdrawn in 1997. But now they have come out, they have used two different valuable genes. It is actually glycoprotein, glycolization is actually, if you can block it, that actually will make actually fruits, very strong. It will not go very soft. And this has already been introduced to two genes actually. That is, one is, mannosides. Another is, what you call that, hexa. You can read it actually, hexamidose. And another one is also, there are three genes actually they are trying to use now. And they have developed already transgenic crops. If everything goes well, the government of India approves this kind of transgenic crops in this country, I think probably we will save not only in tomato but also banana, other mango and many other crops, papaya, many other crops can be saved. Now coming to the last slide, actually National Food Security Act 2013 is a come. The government of India has passed to food security, by which it wants to actually provide actually heavily subsidized food grains to very large number of people. I told you 240 million people, they remain undernourished. Probably by this targeted public distribution system, they are introducing nearly 840 million people can be provided with cheap grains, and that requires 60 million tons more actually food grains to be on the safer side. Enough actually, if there is anything happens because of the calamities, natural calamities, if the food production goes down and the very system that what you call public distribution system itself will suffer. I think probably they have to be very careful. It's a very good public, policy decision by the government of India to feed actually these unfortunate people in this country. But this requires actually all kinds of, the preparations to have enough food in our buffer stocking, etc. Any calamity happens, then we should have enough food in the godowns. and should be able to feed these people. I think this is the last slide. Yeah. So, as I told you to brief you, food security itself is a serious problem because of we don't have proper policy so far. Now, food security will be able to provide this food because of poor economic access. This was actually happening in spite of having grains and the nutrition security. We are far from nutrition secure country actually. So probably we have to go in a very balanced way to ensure the food security in this country. I'm very thankful to you. It is only I have given this talk like a classroom. It is only to just particularly younger generation to understand the seriousness of this problem. Thank you very much to the organizer for giving me this opportunity.